Trump and Republicans run headfirst into a brick wall in court trying to defend their troop deployments, and Senators Brian Schatz and Raphael Warnock talk about the shutdown and Trump's efforts to gut the ACA. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. We've got some rare good news here, and so while there's plenty to be upset about, I think it's worth talking about the glimmer of hope that I've seen. And that is that for an issue I've been tracking more closely than anything else, which is Trump's troop deployments, judges and the courts are serving as a pretty effective bulwark against his moves. So I'm going to first explain what happened in the courts lately and why this matters beyond the obvious, which is that we should not become normalized to troops being deployed in our own cities against our own people. So in California, Judge Breyer blocked Trump's troop deployment to LA. That case is now sitting at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. In Oregon, Judge Immergut blocked Trump's troop deployment to Portland, and in Illinois, Judge Perry blocked Trump's troop deployment to Chicago. So all of that is obviously good news. The better news here is that Judge Perry actually cited Judge Immergut's ruling, which means that each baseless deployment and each previous court loss is impacting subsequent cases, which means that each troop deployment loss begets more Trump troop deployment losses. And normally this wouldn't be the case because trial courts don't create precedent, but in this instance, in all of these instances, it does seem that the judges are at least taking this atmospheric precedent into account, all of which is good news. So what this means is that each time Trump cooks up some bogus excuse to deploy troops against Americans, he'll claim that there's invasions or insurrections or a failure of the local governments to be able to effectuate the laws. All of it is complete bullshit, but the judges can see that pattern. They can see that he had no legitimate justification to do it in LA, no legitimate justification to do it in Portland, no legitimate justification to do it in Chicago. And the deference that they would normally pay the White House, which is called the presumption of regularity, that gets chipped away at every single time. It makes Trump's chances of winning harder and harder with each city he tries to invade. So why does this matter then? This is the second point that I was referring to earlier. Two reasons here. First, we obviously can't normalize U.S. troops being deployed into American cities. We cannot normalize the president of the United States saying that liberals are the enemy from within. We cannot normalize the president saying that American cities are a training ground for the U.S. military. Like, we've watched as Trump has used the troops as his personal police force to terrorize communities and rip families apart. None of this is normal. None of it is acceptable. None of it is legal. And in a just world, this alone would be a scandal second to none in the history of this country. And by the way, the fact that virtually all Republicans are okay with this is a testament to the rot that has pervaded a party that once cosplayed as constitutionalists. But beyond that, there are also major implications for the elections. And as I've explained many times before, the real goal for Trump here is to both normalize Americans to the idea of troops in our cities, of course, and to be able to give himself a legal framework to be able to do so that when the election rolls around in 2026 or 2028, and he wants to use the military to do his election bidding, he won't face any legal roadblocks to be able to do so. And let's be clear, this isn't like me offering up some hysterical hypothesis. Trump literally tried to seize the voting machines in Georgia in 2020. Now, he ultimately wasn't successful because his DOJ, then led by Bill Barr, wasn't going to go along with his plan. But Trump doesn't have that problem now. You think that Pam Bondi is going to put up a fight? Kash Patel, Dan Bongino? These people are literally there because they are election deniers. So with no opposition from the law enforcement agencies, imagine what Trump could do if he had boots on the ground to effectuate his plans. To seize voting machines in the Democratic population centers like Milwaukee and Detroit and Philly and Atlanta, you think it would be possible for Democrats to win elections in Wisconsin or Michigan or PA or Georgia if Trump messes with the voting machines in those places in the Democratic population centers? Not a chance, and he knows that. That is why he tried to seize them last time. But whereas he didn't have boots on the ground then to be able to effectuate those plans, he is trying right now to give himself a legal framework to be able to do so now. That is why these lawsuits are so important, because this is him trying to validate troop deployments. And that is why watching him lose these cases gives me some shred of hope here, because without that legal permission structure, his glide path to having his standing armies waiting in every single blue city in 2026 or 2028 gets that much more difficult, becomes that much more narrow. So are we out of the woods? No, of course not. Because after the trial courts comes the appeals courts, and after the appeals courts comes the U.S. Supreme Court. And this is a U.S. Supreme Court that has bent over backwards to give Trump deference that he doesn't deserve. So there is a long way to go here, and there's no easy path to get there. But as of now, the courts are largely holding up, and that is something worth recognizing. Next up are my interviews with Brian Schatz and Raphael Warnock. I'm joined now by Senator Brian Schatz. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So we have seen a lot of failed votes in the Senate to reopen the government right now. And that's because Senate Democrats are holding the line and not allowing Republicans to reopen the government and have this continuing resolution without sacrificing the little leverage that we do have in terms of getting these ACA subsidies, Affordable Care Act subsidies, preserved so that people's health care doesn't double, triple, quadruple heading into 2026. Can you give a lay of the land in terms of whether your Republican colleagues are recognizing that this is not a smart moral or political stance for them to be taking, and that the vast majority of Americans are actually against their position here? I mean, they're representing the 22% of Americans who don't think that these ACA subsidies should be continued.
Yeah, I don't think they quite understood how serious this problem was. And a bunch of people I mentioned that online, and people were like, come on, they knew exactly what they were doing. And I'm like, don't give them that much credit. They were just doing a Trump thing. Trump demanded that they pass the big, beautiful bill. He called it a big, beautiful bill. It was branded as repealing Obamacare, which is sort of an article of faith among Republicans. And, but now they're seeing these premiums increase. And, part of it was like, we're screaming, hey, man, you're going to double the premiums for 22 million Americans, most of whom are Republicans. And they just thought we were kind of like using a talking point. But now the letters are going out to tell people your rates are up. And so it is starting to sink in two things. First, that this is a real crisis. It's not something we just went into a lab with some strategists and pollsters to try to figure out what to fight about. Right. This is the thing that is the most urgent crisis in terms of the cost of living for people in the United States of America. I mean, the price of vegetables is up 39%. The price of coffee is up 29%, 20%. The price of electricity is now rising at double the rate of inflation, and now this. And so this is a place where we can take a stand and make a difference. That's number one. Number two is, I think they just thought that we weren't all that serious about it. And they thought that it was going to be a replay of March. But it's not March. The sort of parade of horribles that they were contemplating, they basically went through with everything prior to the shutdown anyway. So this idea, hey, if you don't watch out, we're going to cut things from Democratic states. And all of us are looking at each other going, yeah, you're doing that right now.
Right.
And, and I also think the threat to lay off hundreds of thousands of federal workers who are disproportionately veterans, the threat to not give them back pay, all of that has backfired sort of in Republican world, but also with the general public where, there's a beltway argument about a clean CR versus a 7-week versus a 4-week and all that stuff. But the truth is people are smarter than all of that. Sure, they're not paying super granular attention to every detail, but they know one thing. Donald Trump is in charge of Washington, and when things are fucked up, it's very likely his fault.
Well, there are going to be people who see this and just say, from a raw political perspective. So let's put the moral, the human argument completely to the side, and just say from a raw political perspective, the hill that Republicans are looking to die on is to continue into 2026, an election year, which is a referendum on the party in power, trying to allow healthcare costs to double, triple, quadruple, or just be or people lose their healthcare entirely. And so if they are so hell-bent on exacting this kind of pain on people, their own constituents included, in fact, disproportionately their own constituents. In the last 5 years, we've seen the states that have adopted ACA enrollment are much redder than blue states. But why not just let them?
I mean, that's listen, I'm not that cynical. I'm just not. But I've certainly made that argument. If we were a little more cynical, we'd just let you stew in this and say, you just did a super unpopular thing. I wish you the very best. But, like us or not, think we're, not strong enough or whatever. We actually really care about tens of millions of Americans, being thrown off their health care. We really care about Medicaid being destroyed and rural hospitals getting crushed. Like, we're very worried about what's about to happen to Americans, and we're trying to fix it. The other thing I'd say is that, in the run up to the midterms, when we actually did save the Affordable Care Act, the same argument was made. Why don't we just let them do it? Because that'll make us stronger in the midterms. And the truth was, we saved the Affordable Care Act, and then we still ran on them trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act
Right.
and had a very good midterm. So I think we can do the right thing and the smart political thing. And in this case, they are very much aligned.
And so, talk to me about what your Republican colleagues, what you've heard from your Republican colleagues right now. Is there some sense of uncertainty at the path that they're on right now? Have you heard anything, any rumblings from the Republican side in terms of, not just the political ramifications here? I mean, the polling ramifications here, and the consequences on their own states, their own districts.
Um, the answer is sure, rumblings, but this all is going to go through Donald John Trump. Mike Johnson in particular is not going to make a move without him. And, we saw him on TV. We saw him shut down the House for 3 weeks unexpectedly. And so my view is, we can negotiate with rank and file Republicans, but that's not quite a waste of time. But that's not the way to get to a resolution of this challenge. So, they are basically totally servile to him.
Yeah.
Even the people who like to do negotiations, that are experienced legislators, that are not MAGA in their core, they've basically given up on being independent. And so it's not like we're going to get a cohort of people to work with Democrats to like get this done, unless Donald Trump views this as a sufficient liability. And I think that's where, your podcast and the work of activists out there really comes to be critical, because until they realize that this is not a Democrats versus Republicans issue, until they realize that it is their constituents that they are harming, I think they're not going to back down. It is starting to sink in how serious we are about this and how real this problem is, but I don't think they're there yet.
Can you say with any degree of confidence that Democrats are going to be? I mean, I know that there have been a few defections in terms of Democratic senators offering up their vote to Republicans for this clean CR. What I would suggest is a naive belief that the same people who took these subsidies away are then somehow going to voluntarily end up at the negotiating table. But that notwithstanding, is there any sense of how united the Democratic caucus is in terms of not capitulating to the Republicans here?
Well, as deputy whip, I take the counting part super seriously. So every day is a new whip. Every day is a new assessment of, where everyone's head is at. But I will say we feel pretty unified right now. Now, I do think that, part of what we have to do, and, Brian, you and I talked about this after we lost the election, that we have to like kind of have grown-up conversations with activists about, okay, what are we trying to achieve here, right? And what is a realistic path to try to achieve something? And I think if the standard is that we don't reopen the government until all the fascism stops, right? Then we're just literally never going to reopen the government, because Donald Trump is going to, try to indict Letitia James and try to jail, James Comey and J.B. Pritzker and all the rest of it. So we have to be ratcheting up some wins here. But we also have to be in a position where people should not expect nothing from us. And I think the frustration from March was that we gave away something for nothing. But on the other hand, we have to understand that this is an incremental process, that inserting ourselves into the legislative process to get a W is a really important first step. But we're not going to solve all the world's problems through however this shutdown ends. We're going to try to solve some very significant problems. I think the most significant among them, that we are no longer irrelevant to Republicans in the legislative process. And as a check against this, wannabe authoritarian, that's a super important step. But I also want to just tell everybody, like, however this ends, even if it ends in the most optimistic scenario, it will not fix everything. And it will not even fix a third of what needs to get fixed, but it will be a step in the right direction.
Right. I mean, look, a step in the right direction is even underselling the fact that 24 million Americans will have continued access to affordable health care. And if we didn't have that small win, and I mean, yes, it is a small win in the grand scheme of things, but like if we didn't have that is life and death for millions upon millions of Americans right now. So with that said, I want to ask one more question if we have a quick beat, and that is just your initial reaction to the news that just broke that Donald Trump has indicted Letitia James for something that even his previously appointed U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia did not think there was any justification to indict her for.
Yeah, it's malicious prosecution. It's very similar to what just happened with James Comey. They couldn't find a career prosecutor to bring the case. I think this one might even be even more thin in the sense that it's mortgage fraud.
Yeah.
And just a very like goofy charge. So I have no doubt that she'll be exonerated. I wouldn't be surprised if it got kicked way before a trial. So I think there's two ways to look at this, right? One is that Donald Trump is doing authoritarian things. The other is that Donald Trump has not yet succeeded to become an authoritarian ruler. And I think that in the interest there are a bunch of people who want the rest of the United States to be sufficiently alarmed. And so we talk about the United States of America like we've already crossed some Rubicon and we're already at the bottom of the hill and authoritarianism is here. And I don't think that's the right way to look at this. I think we have to view Trump as a very serious threat to the American experiment, a very serious threat to our freedoms. But when we push back and use the judicial system, we have been winning. I think Gavin Newsom in California has demonstrated that both in the judicial process and in this redistricting process, that we are not without tools. I think what the people in Portland are doing in terms of peaceful prison demonstrations is very clever and smart. I think J.B. Pritzker is a good example. I think, frankly, when Brendan Carr tried to, basically gut the First Amendment, that Ted Cruz stepping up was an enormously important thing. So we're not without tools here. And so two things are true at the same time. One is Donald Trump would absolutely become an authoritarian permanent ruler if he could. Yeah. The other is that we're a pretty long way from that as long as we all are disciplined and smart and together and fight like hell.
Good place to leave off. Senator, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm joined now by the U.S. Senator for Georgia, Raphael Warnock. Thanks so much for joining me again.
Great to be with you.
So, Senator Warnock, you have been arguably the most effective messenger here during the shutdown because you've begun posting what healthcare costs are going to look like from 2025 to 2026 based on what your constituents have been sending you. I'm going to put an example right here on the screen, for example, that shows the extent to which those healthcare costs for anybody who does receive Affordable Care Act healthcare have tripled or quadrupled. So first and foremost, can you give us some insight into what you've heard from your constituents as this process continues to play itself out?
Well, let me be very clear, and this is what I tried to do in that post that you referenced. Nobody wants a shutdown. At least I don't want a shutdown. The members of my caucus don't want a shutdown. I know firsthand the pain that federal workers, for example, are already experiencing by the ways in which the Trump administration has already been shutting the government down. But here's what else I don't want. I don't want the people that I represent in the state of Georgia to have their premiums hiked so much that healthcare becomes literally unaffordable. And that's what's slated to happen in a matter of weeks. As people watch their premiums, if they're on the ACA marketplace, they will see their premiums perhaps double, some triple, quadruple. Working class families can't afford that. That's what this is about. We can both fund healthcare by rolling back the awful provisions in the one big ugly bill, I call it, and we can reopen the government. My Republican colleagues ought to join me.
Senator, this is not an issue that's only going to impact Democratic voters. In fact, the recent ACA enrollments in the last 5 years have been disproportionately in states that voted for Trump, including West Virginia, Tennessee, and Texas. And so how are your Republican colleagues thinking about the actions that they're taking, which, if they don't meet Democrats halfway here and extend these ACA subsidies, it's going to be their own constituents in their own states heading into an election year, by the way, that are going to see all of their healthcare premiums surge. And so how are your Republican colleagues thinking about this moment?
Listen to this. 3 out of 4 of the Americans who are relying on the ACA subsidies come from red states that Trump won. 3 out of 4. This is not a Democrat and Republican issue. This is an American issue. This is about folks sitting around their kitchen table right now trying to figure out how in the world are they going to be able to afford health care come January 2026, given this price hike that's coming compliments of the Republican Party.
Do you think that given the fact that the narrative that's really taken hold here is the fact that Republicans are looking to refuse to continue these ACA subsidies, and given the fact that it is so unpopular, the latest Kaiser Family Foundation poll found that 78% of Americans want these ACA subsidies to be continued so that their healthcare costs don't double, triple, or quadruple. Do you think that there is any indication, at least from Republicans or Trump, that they are going to come back to the negotiating table and meet the Democrats where they're demanding that these are increased?
Let me be clear. Our current healthcare system is far from perfect. In many ways, it's broken. And now they are trying to take a system that's broken and they're going to make it worse by burdening ordinary Americans who are already seeing the price rise on everything that they have to purchase. Groceries have been going up since Trump has become president. The price of gas has been going up. The price of coffee has been going up. So you stop at the local Quick Trip, the coffee costs more, the gas costs more, your prescription drugs cost more, and now your health care is going to cost more. This is unsustainable, and it is the reason why I am both trying to fund the government, because we need to reopen the government. This Republican shutdown needs to end, and let's be clear, it's a Republican shutdown. They have the White House. They're in the majority in the House and the Senate. And by the way, the House hasn't come back to work. While the government is shut down, while federal workers are being furloughed, while critical government services are hanging in the balance, while military members are on schedule not to be paid in a matter of days, Speaker Johnson has sent the House home because he doesn't want to have to vote on the Epstein files. Imagine that. He ought to come back to work. He ought to call his caucus back to work.
What was your reaction to seeing the fact that even Marjorie Taylor Greene came out against the Republicans' unwillingness to do anything about the fact that Americans are about to see their healthcare costs double? I mean, she came out and she posted that she's not exactly a fan of the ACA, but the fact that Republicans and their leadership have no plan to address the fact that in just a few months from now, healthcare costs are going to double, triple, or quadruple, that she's not on board with that.
You know that it's a critical moment for the average person anytime Raphael Warnock and Marjorie Taylor Greene
yeah,
are essentially saying the same thing.
Yeah.
My brother, that doesn't happen often. According to her, she looked and saw that the premiums of her own adult children will go up so much in 2026 that their health care is unaffordable. Listen, there's a lesson in this for politicians, for people who serve in elected office. She's telling the story of ordinary people. In this case, it just happens to be our own children. And that we are in this fight in the first place, raising the healthcare premiums for ordinary people in order to give billionaires, multi-billionaires, a tax cut, shows you how disconnected and clueless too many people in this town are. They ought to come back to work, sit down, let's work on a bipartisan proposal. I don't expect them to see this the way I see it. They're not going to do everything I want them to do, but they're refusing even to talk. They're refusing to come to work. Meanwhile, workers are being laid off and people are watching their healthcare premiums go up.
Senator, you have the blessing and the curse of coming to us from a purple state, a true purple state. And I'm just curious, in Georgia, what has the response from folks who you've spoken with about this impending healthcare crisis? What's the response been like? And I'm especially concerned, not just from those, true blue Democrats out there, but from independents or Republicans who recognize the extent to which they were sold a bill of goods by a party that swore up and down that they cared about the cost of something so granular that they were talking about the price of eggs. And yet now, not only have they presided over increases in cost of everything because of this trade war, but they're in the process of closing down rural hospitals. They're stripping Medicaid away from millions of Americans. Right now, they're looking to double, triple ACA subsidies. And so, what have your conversations been like with those people?
Well, I was down at Evans Memorial Hospital in Claxton, Georgia, a while ago. This is a red district. Those folks, most of the people in that district didn't vote for me, but I came by to see them because I care. And they have a small rural hospital there that, like all rural hospitals, is barely holding it together anyway. And now they're going to see, as a result of the one big ugly bill, about a $3 million cut to their hospital, and they're trying to figure out how to hold it together. They may have to close their ICU. Imagine that you're in a rural town,
yeah,
and they have to close your local ICU. This is untenable, it's unsustainable, it's unjustifiable, and that's why I think my Republican friends are hearing from their constituents. By the way, there's a reason why 3 out of 4 of the folks who are relying on these ACA subsidies are in red states, is because these are the states like Georgia that have not expanded Medicaid. And so because of that, they need these subsidies even more. Republicans need to focus on the people and not the politics. And if we do that, we can figure out a way to get this done for the American people.
And finally, let's finish off with this. Senator, you and I have spoken before. We've spoken about the fact that I'm very secular, but you have become kind of my moral compass in Washington for all things faith related. And so I'm curious in this moment, as we see this issue of the potential for healthcare costs to surge, bearing down on us, as we see these ICE raids terrorize communities across the country, as we see fascism continue to take hold in this country. Where do you draw some hope from? I know there are a lot of people who pay attention to politics on a daily basis, and for whom the helplessness and despair kind of weighs down so heavily because of what we're seeing around us. And so I'm curious, from your vantage, where you draw some hope from.
Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And a faith that is real and mature doesn't fantasize about the world in a way that's unrealistic. These are tough times, and there are those who are attacking healthcare, who are attacking immigrant communities, raining down terror in communities all across our country. But here's something else that they're trying to do. They're trying to weaponize despair. They're trying to flood the zone and so overwhelm us that they will convince us that they've already won. And if you're convinced that they've already won, then you stop fighting. And when you stop fighting, they do win. And so our job is to recognize that this moment is not about the people in power. It is about the power in the people. And as a man of faith, here's something that I have noticed about evil. As I read the scriptures that guide my life as a Christian, as I think about the events of world history, here's the thing about evil. Evil always goes too far. Evil always gets a little bit too impressed with itself. It's filled up with hubris. Evil always goes too far, and because it goes too far, it contains within itself the seed of its own destruction. Our job is to help it to do what it does, to keep fighting the good fight, to remind each other that at the end of the day, we're all we've got. And again, these are tough times, and it's going to be tough for a little while here. But let's keep the faith. Let's keep pushing.
Well, I appreciate the optimism. If you end up back preaching at any point, let me know. I think me and thousands and thousands of people watching this right now will be happy to sit there and listen to you. So
10 a.m. any Sunday morning, brother.
That's it.
I'm not Ebenezer Baptist Church where Dr. King preached. That's a standing invitation, Brian.
All right. Well, I'll take you up on it, I promise. All right, Senator, thank you so much for the words of optimism here and for taking the time today. To listen to the audio version of these episodes, click the thumbnail right here on the screen and make sure to subscribe to my audio podcast. And of course, to see more of my content, that subscribe button's on the screen as well.